When you have to shoot, don't talk.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us for an episode 22 of the Trap House Podcast. My name's Justin Jett. Today's episode is me and Charlie just kind of kicking back, talking about our recent trip to Tennessee, kind of recapping it all. Before we do that, we got to give a shout out to the sponsors helping us keep this show alive. We have J3 Outdoors. That's j3o.com. Check out the website, the maker of the Hags Bracket. They're also on social media. And the Top Lot Stretcher Company. Check them out. Their website is toplotstretcherco.com. And especially right now, since it's getting towards the end of the season, people are starting to put their fur up. They want to look presentable, make it look nice. They have a really nice adjustable stretcher that we recommend, and I'm sure they'll take care of you if you send them a message or any questions you need. Check out their website, toplotstretcherco.com. And last but not least, HoosierTrapperSupply.com. Check us out. We have everything you need on the trap line. If you're new to all this, we have beginner kits. Certainly the top dog predator bait that we always recommend and support on our YouTube show of Hoosier Trapper Outdoors. All our lures and hardware, all that can be found on HoosierTrapperSupply.com. So I think that covers it. Let's jump into it. Episode 22 with Charlie Mashek. Let's go. All right, we just got back from Tennessee, and I will be honest, it was kind of a downer.
Yeah.
As far as trapping goes. I mean, we still had a good time and made the best of it, but weather-wise just really slowed us down.
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. We had just kind of a background on this. This customer in Tennessee, South Tennessee, is basically on the Alabama line, had been calling here for, 3 or 4 years, and he originally started out buying deer scent from us, and then he kind of got interested in trapping, and he was doing a little bit of trapping on his own, and he kept saying, hey, I got these deer leases down here. You guys are welcome to come down and trap. And he'd been kind of asking and talking about it for at least 3 years, maybe 4. And then and last year we had intended to go, and then because of weather out west, we had to cancel the New Mexico trip a year ago, or not cancel, but postpone it. And then that kind of knocked out going to Tennessee, which was our intention. So basically to keep up with, to meet our obligation to him that we said we would go, is then we went down this year. So he was very hospitable, and took us out to eat and fed us and all that. So anyways, he was a great host. So yeah, I mean, like Justin said, we got there on a Monday late afternoon. It was beautiful, sunny, about almost 70 degrees.
Yep.
And
then by morning it was raining.
Right.
Pretty heavy.
It rained the whole day. Light enough that we could get out and set traps to a point. It was we got some traps in the ground. And then so that would be Tuesday night, and then it really started raining.
Oh yeah. I remember we were laying there in the dark and you were like, this isn't good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything we had put out had been washed away. There was flash flood for that county. And that just made it, tough.
Right.
But most everything was sitting in puddles, dirt holes filled with water. Or, depending on the slope or the grade of the ground, some of the trap cover had been washed away even. So,
right. So we actually, it kind of slowed down a little bit. It was still raining. Kind of slowed down a little bit. We kind of made some sets, adjusted. Some that were literally standing in big puddles of water or pools of water, we literally had to move. And then we did set traps. We just basically, to be honest, if we were at home, we would have just waited.
Right.
But we're on a trip with a limited time schedule.
Money's already invested in license and all that.
Right.
We set a set time frame and we're going.
So we pushed through it. And I will say, and we'll get into this later, but we didn't see a lot of signs. So it was kind of like,
right.
That was kind of weighing on us too.
We were dealing with 2 different property owners. Is that right?
2 different lease.
Or lease.
Yeah, lease owners or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
And were they about equal in size? Like 2,000 acres each, roughly, or so?
Right. And then there was some smaller farm ground
mixed in that.
Yeah, in addition to that. So,
but as far as what it looks like on a map, the same coyotes could be in both.
Right.
To a certain degree, depending on where boundary lines and all that stuff.
But to go ahead and to continue the recap on the weather, so it just continued.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is, checking traps on Wednesday.
That was more rain.
No, Thursday. Still raining. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, checking traps then on Thursday. Still hadn't caught anything yet. And caught a possum. Take that back. And still raining. And it was raining hard. We got to about 1 o'clock, and the forecast was absolutely terrible. And it was pointless to put traps in the ground because they're going to be dysfunctional by morning.
We took a trip up to Nashville just to kill some time and do a little sightseeing. And it was raining there too, but it wasn't as bad.
You're not setting traps when you're in Nashville, so you can be inside or whatever. So that was kind of cool. So that was one of the highlights of the trip, really. So we get back that evening. It is pouring down rain, and get up the next morning, and the guy had provided a house trailer for us to stay in, and get up the next morning, we didn't have any water.
That was within the first day, I thought.
No, I think
second day.
I think it was Friday morning. I think it might have been Thursday morning.
I don't know.
I think it was Anyways, Thursday, Friday, get up, don't have any water, or maybe it was that evening. Anyways, lost track. So thought maybe it was just a breaker. So the fellow that invited us down comes over and looks at it, and literally the well pump was of course below ground and in like a pit, and enough water had gotten in there it
shorted it out,
fried the pump. So here we are, pouring down rain, and no water in our house trailer. So he was nice enough. He said, well, you guys can come up and stay with me. Certainly use, and I said, well, how about we just stay in the trailer? We'll get some buckets of water. That way we can.
There's plenty of water around.
Yeah.
Dish it out of a creek or whatever.
Yeah. Flush the toilets, whatever. We'll go to his place and take a shower. So we stuck it out, and then it did quit raining.
Yeah, but then it snowed.
Temperature
dropped right on that line where it could be either or.
Right.
And there was like a downpour, though, of big old flakes when we were driving home.
We were driving home. We went to supper, and we were driving back, and literally the snowflakes were absolutely enormous, and it was like being in a fog. It wasn't like a whiteout, wind-blowing snow. It was like a solid, big flake, whiteout snow. It was.
That's crazy.
You don't see that very often in your life. I hadn't seen that very often in my 62 years. So that was kind of interesting and kind of crazy, and I'm glad we were relatively close to where we needed to end up at when that actually started. But it was blinding. It was high dims on your vehicle were impossible. Low dims were better than high dims, like being in a fog, but it was still really difficult to see. It was strange. So anyways, get up the next morning, got snow on the ground, which was really fine.
Did we pass one big thing?
What was that?
The tornado.
Oh yeah, tornado warning.
Before the snow, there was tornado warning.
Yeah, and evidently somebody about 6 miles from us had some damage on a garage and whatever. So
subsiding.
Yeah. So that was another thing of the tornado. So get up, got snow on the ground, which really was no big deal. That's fine.
Yeah,
it was light snow. It did make everything white. It was kind of pretty out. At least it wasn't raining. So I think by 1 or 2, it was completely gone. And
something like that.
yeah, and then we actually got like a 2-day break. The rest of that day was not raining.
Well, we caught a coyote the day of the snow morning.
Right.
That was the first one.
Right. Pure mud.
Yeah, mud ball.
Pure mud. And Tennessee coyotes, South Tennessee coyotes.
Yeah.
So. And then so then we did get we got 2-day break of pretty nice. So we had the remaining part of the snow day was nice, and then Saturday and Sunday were both nice. And then
that was it.
And that was it. But
in the 2 days that were nice, we ended up catching 3 really manged out coyotes, or was it 4?
3, I think.
3, and Charlie connected on a bobcat, which is cool because we've never had any, we haven't trapped in Tennessee before, so it's just kind of neat to say we got a Tennessee bobcat.
Yeah. I think these were severely manged coyotes.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean,
some of the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah. And, they weren't going to live much longer. And in the wild, they have no way to get treatment. If you were able to treat them, then they would live. But,
right.
Somebody had mentioned to us that, well, they survive that. Well, they don't. I've spoken with our fur bearer biologist, good resources. They don't. In fact, it can affect populations locally for a period of time where you literally get mange and they'll die off. One thing that's worse than that is a parvo virus, like your dog gets vaccinated for. If that gets in the coyotes, that's even more devastating. But severe mange and clearly, we did these coyotes a favor. There's nothing crueler than Mother Nature. I mean, when it comes to, that's basically Mother Nature's control. So anyways, Sunday evening, that was Friday or Saturday, Sunday, both nice days. Caught the coyotes, caught the bobcat, and then Sunday evening, it starts all over again.
About 9 o'clock, and I remember it wasn't supposed to start until like 4 a.m. or something.
Right.
It came early.
Right.
We, instead of pulling that day, we thought, well, majority of the evening it will be clear until the rain hits, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right, because
a chance for the animals to run in front of that front.
Right.
And that was not the case, so we ended up pulling traps in a downpour for the most part.
Right. We kind of cleaned up a little bit of our line that was areas that were really tough driving in that kind of weather.
Yeah.
And we had debated pulling traps on Sunday morning because we did know that was coming in with heavy rain and additional flood warnings.
For the next 5 days straight, too.
Right.
So we tried to squeeze one more good day out of it, but it didn't happen. Blanked out and pulled them all in the rain, and
both of us were soaked. Yeah.
It wasn't too fun.
Then we met the I don't know what they call him down there, game warden, the conservation officer, to get a tag for our cat, and he was accommodating. And basically that was kind of when we headed home. We did make a couple stops on the way home, stopped in Nashville again, went to Maker's Mark Distillery, which was very cool. So anybody ever gets a chance, even if you're not a bourbon drinker or a whiskey drinker or whatever,
the process is awesome.
The history and the process and the all of that is very interesting, and it's pretty neat, and it obviously very appropriate to Kentucky, which we're going through Kentucky on the way home. So we actually called the trip a couple days early, 3 days early, 2 to 3 days early, just because of the weather, and it was just.
Just wasn't productive. But all in all, the downtime that we got to do the sightseeing stuff, that was fun. Right. So that did, at least we were about two hours away from Nashville. At least we had something to do.
Right.
And some stuff there in Florence, Alabama, college town. So there was a few things to get involved with.
But it was a tough trip. Trapping was difficult. And so this trip kind of got me thinking in advance. I thought, all right, so we've got 2 pretty good sized deer leases, and we've got and it turned out there was good access within the deer leases. They had maintained because it was paper company land. We need to say that. So these were all like pine, planted pine, and pine trees. So it was maintained by the paper company, and then they lease it to hunters to hunt. And both of these have been leased for a long time by the same people. So that was our connection in. So both properties were very close to each other. And like Justin already mentioned, that it was the same coyotes on the two. What we had run into in Mississippi on a big deer, well, not even as big as this, but on a high fence deer lease, these places weren't fenced, but on a high fence deer lease,
it was hammered.
It was hammered. Everyone there that was hunting or managing the place, or even they had a guy that was friends that kind of did a little bit of trapping. I mean, it was the Dead Sea. I mean, they had everything well under control.
Yep.
And then to reference, and I said before we went, I said it's either going to be pretty decent or it's going to be like that, where it's like the Dead Sea, where there's just nothing there, nothing left, because everybody's just shooting whatever they can as far as a predator goes.
It's a coyote, it's bad, get rid of it.
Right.
And
same with the bobcats, and I don't know about foxes, but we didn't run into any sign of any foxes at all, no gray foxes, no red foxes, nothing, no tracks. We did see, I think, one set of bobcat tracks, and we, in I can't even say two areas, but two stops, which were relatively close to each other, we did see coyote tracks. But that was basically it.
As far as fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, a lot of times on these trips, we do find quite a bit of scat and stuff in the roads.
Right.
Very little. I think maybe one that was fresh.
Yeah, that was it.
Then we found some prehistoric stuff that was all white and been there for who knows how long.
I mean, yeah, the hair was what was still there, that whatever the coyote had been eating, and that was what was left, and everybody's seen those, so you know what we're referring to. So anyways, we're essentially, we knew that the area wasn't huge, and we knew that in a sense we would be trapping against ourselves, but we set it pretty heavy because that's what we had available to us. And, if they were going to move through, we were going to have areas that there were coyotes. And we basically worked off the travel ways, the roads. And, we connected on the 4 coyotes. Now, clearly the weather affected us. And I don't know how many more we would have caught had the weather been decent. But certainly when the weather is that severe, you're affected. And I don't know, maybe somebody's got some input on this, but when it is heavy downpour rain with flash flood warning, I mean like 5-inch rains, I don't know how much those coyotes move in that kind of weather.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
rough.
There's some that do, I know, but in general. And then clearly your scent is affected when it's like that. So, and then your dysfunction of stuff, trap beds, so it's literally standing in water. I will say that a dirt hole with water in it is just fine with Top Dog in there. I mean, Top Dog does very well standing in the water. There's 2 ingredients in that Top Dog that set it apart from any other bait on the market, and that actually activates those ingredients even further. So that's fine. But literally when the trap bed's standing in the water, or the entire set's standing in a big puddle of water, or you just have so much rain that, a coyote could walk right by and may not even smell it. I don't, it's just, moisture definitely helps scent for sure versus dry, very dry conditions. But in that kind of condition, it's very difficult to trap. So,
I was kind of thinking about the whole Dead Sea aspect of it. If they had a bunch of coyotes at one point, because they seemed pretty adamant that, there was quite a bit there. But, that's from a hunter standpoint, they don't really, think on a trapper's level, I guess you would say.
Right.
But if they did have a problem, it was taking care of itself, I think, with all that mange and disease out. Because I have never been on a property where we've seen that much deer. There were deer everywhere, every day.
Yeah, crazy quantities.
Bad weather, good weather. There were deer everywhere. And a lot of turkeys, too.
Yeah.
Lots of turkeys.
Yeah.
So they're doing good on the predators, in my opinion.
Right. Right. The predators aren't hurting anything,
Right,
for sure.
yeah.
And if the predators occasionally took out a deer, they got to live. They got to eat too. So I in the scheme of things, they did not have a predator problem on that area. But it got me to thinking too. So we got this hunter perspective. It's like, and he went with us a couple mornings, maybe 2 or 3 mornings. I don't know. The guy that invited us down for part of the line, and he would, he'd be out, and it's like, well, I saw a coyote right here, across the road right here. And I was trying to explain. I said, well, that's a very random location. So basically we're driving, and it just came out of the woods of the standing pine and ran to the other side of the standing pine. And I tried to explain to him that how random that was. And we do know that coyotes do that. And we know that coyotes can go just across the middle of a field. And clearly you're going to see them. But as a trapper, you want to set the most likely places to set up.
Right.
And like the gravel roads, the access roads to the forest, all of that. So those are the long paths to travel, and they're a lot less random. So, so he was getting, and he realized he was getting an education as well, because the hunter perspective is certainly different than the trapping perspective, although the knowledge on both sides certainly helped the other to a point. Right. So this idea of the random location, it's like, well, we could set a trap there, but it might go
months.
Yeah, literally, without catching a coyote. So he goes, you set those right on the road? And I said, yeah, we do. Some of them we didn't, but we set them off the access points, so it's still basically on the roads.
Right.
But
easiest path to travel, just like for us to take,
I'll say when we first started going to Arkansas years ago, and we're public ground, this was all private we're talking about, but that was public ground. So we were very leery of setting on.
We didn't want to get robbed.
Right. We didn't want to get traps get stolen. We just didn't want issues. We didn't want, the whole thing. And basically, and that's a deep forest trapping. And some of that actually it's not paper company, but it's the loggers lease part of the national forest there and plant it and maintain it and harvest it. So, some of it's kind of similar to Tennessee, but the whole idea is very similar. So basically, we had learned within a year that we couldn't set like we were and expect to catch stuff. So right. we basically had to set those travel ways because
take the risk.
Right.
Couple traps get messed with or taken. It's
the way it goes. So, over the years, we've had very little trouble with stolen traps. We've had a couple issues, but overall, very little considering we're on private or public, and our catch is good because we're on the travel ways, and we're not setting that random location, which may catch a coyote over the course of an entire season, or it may not. So it's kind of interesting. I was reading an article in Trapper's World, I believe. I think O'Gorman wrote it, and he was talking about government trappers out west, and basically they would get on a 2-track, and those 2 tracks out west can go on forever, and by the odometer would make a set every mile. So
whatever was there.
Right. So, that idea, they're on the 2-track, and they're, so you could start setting traps, and you could set way more than that, but you don't need to. So you got to kind of put that point of view to what you're doing when you're trapping, like what we were doing. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. And the other thing is, each lease was 2,000 acres, which sounds like a lot, and it really isn't. And so we had 4,000 acres with good access roads, set pretty heavy because that's all basically. And we had another location, a smaller farm. Sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And we knew that going into it. You can, this would have been a perfect location to trap before you went to work. It wasn't a good location to trap if you were involved for the whole day. That's basically what it came down to.
Yeah. find your key few spots on that giant piece of land,
Right.
set them up, and just drive through on their way to work.
Right. It would have been perfect for that. But in our scenario, we wanted new geography, we wanted a new state, we wanted the new experience, and of course, this guy had asked several times, and I said, yeah, well, So
when he was asking, that was prior to the rubber jaw or the new law being changed? Because before it was the soft jaw.
Initially, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, initially I said, well, there's the soft, and then they did change that, and that was thanks to John Daniels, the current president of the National Trappers Association. He and some others were instrumental in getting that changed in Tennessee. So pretty interesting with how that all came about and how Tennessee basically, because of dog hunters, that state has been not particularly trapper friendly, and now it's I would consider it definitely a trapper friendly state. So
right.
Pretty important. So but this idea of big ground, you could go out on this 2,000 acres, and if you're a deer hunter, it's perfect. And there's deer there, and you don't need. Mm-hmm. It's ideal. But if you're a coyote trapper,
we need more.
You need more ground. You need more ground. A coyote. So 2,000 acres is essentially 3 square miles, roughly, and a coyote's home range can be up to 10 square miles. They may regularly use 3 to 4 square miles, but they will outstretch to that complete 10 square miles. So that right there tells you with the 4,000 acres, very potentially are the same coyotes, or certainly are run both areas. And that, a white-tailed deer, the big bucks when they're in the rut may do that, but generally they don't do that either. Run that big of an area, so they're much more local than that. So, typically if you have trail cameras out for deer and you'll regularly see the same ones, when the rut comes in, that definitely throws a wrench in that. As far as those bucks, they're traveling, cruising, looking for does or whatever. But in general, they're in generally the same area. They don't move quite like a coyote does. A coyote's got pups, then they're maybe more smaller areas, but generally they run those big areas. So that idea of that 4,000 acres is just not that much. And it's funny. I was talking to a trapper, and last year when we were in New Mexico, and that was kind of another Dead Sea thing for sure. With all the 24/7 predator control, shooting coyotes from the air, all that, and the oddest thing about that trip, and we've mentioned it before, is we didn't see any big game on that trip at all. No elk, no mule deer, no antelope, nothing. And we
I think they overgrazed it.
Yeah, I think the cattle had overgrazed it. I think they'd overhunted it prior to that. They were blaming all that on predators, but I think it was just a whole scenario. So anyways, just going back to my point of that was 52,000 acres. Beautiful place. It was like having your own national park if you owned it. It was beautiful. It's awesome. It could be even more awesome, once with some management practices, which I think the new owners of the ranch were working on. But in the scheme of things, in the western trap line, 52,000 acres is not a whole bunch.
Yeah. Why? You figure limited access roads.
I mean, it's got 2 tracks going through it, but some of it was, even with 4-wheel drive or whatever, were so rough.
Yeah.
That,
yeah, it wasn't too, easy to navigate through.
And
it had spots.
Yeah. And we always have to keep in mind that we do have to get our truck home. We have to drive home.
There's always some sort of issue.
Yeah. So if you live local, and it's not quite as a big issue, but I was talking to somebody and said, yeah, 52,000 acres sounds really big, but it's not that super big. Cause a lot of it is just on that wide open prairie. So you're talking about the random location there. So on the wide open high desert, it's not really prairie, kind of that prairie look to it, but that high desert within those big, between the mountains or the canyon walls or whatever you want to call it. That's the random location. So that's burning up a bunch of that acreage right there.
Right.
So settable locations on 52,000 acres of high desert mountain type area reduces your set location significantly. So
yeah, if you took that 52,000 acres and did it here in the Midwest, oh my gosh,
it's a whole
more
different,
than you could handle to set.
Yeah, but
for sure,
it's totally different. And you could do on that, you could do the 1 mile setup like O'Gorman was writing about that some of the government trappers used to do or still do.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I mean you could do that, but we were actually set heavier than that for sure. So, anyways, this idea of ground and what you have available to you, and that if you have the entire time to trap to run like a longer line, and you got all your time committed to trapping, then the available space that you have is so important. A guy told me in the shop about 3 weeks ago that he lives here he actually lives in Kentucky, but he came up to the shop and he said, I went over to West Virginia because friend of mine invited me because there's coyotes all over the place. And he goes, so I went down there, I stayed with him. He was a friend. He goes, I didn't catch a coyote, not one coyote. I said, well, how much ground did you have? He said, 300 acres. I said, well, you didn't go trap some of the public ground or anything like that? He goes, no, I just stayed on the 300 and I never caught a coyote. And I don't remember how many days, several days. So it's like, okay, well, you're super limited.
Right. For sure.
And if those coyotes don't come through that area for 2 weeks, then you're completely, yeah. So you just can't limit, especially to dedicate that much time to that. You can't just have 300 acres or whatever, that just doesn't work.
Right. So going forward, we were asked to come back. Didn't sound too exciting based off what we went through. But knowing part of that was weather, and we pretty much said we just need more ground with it to make it worth it.
Right.
And there's some public ground there that we're going to maybe jump into in a few years.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we got some other offers on the table for next year, next season. But
yeah, I think we need to at least double on some private ground, 8,000 to 10,000 acres roughly, and then
spread it out
in the line or whatever. That's something that makes sense to run a loop or whatever.
Right.
Then I think that public ground area was around 25,000 or somewhere in there.
Right.
Quite a bit. Never been there. Don't know how good the access is or anything like that, but it definitely sounds more promising than what we just tried to do.
Right.
So there's only one way to find out.
Well, and the other thing is we kind of learned our lesson on this one too. So this one's relatively close to home. It's only 6 hours away. We need to just drive down in advance, drive the area, take a look at it before we can go down there and set up traps or commit to it and say, look at it, see what we got.
When it's this close, for sure.
Right. Obviously, if we're going clear to New Mexico or Arkansas or wherever, then that still can be done, and there's guys that do that. But that's a long ways to drive.
If you're double-digit hours,
right,
one way,
right.
That's kind of where you should draw the line.
Yeah, New Mexico's 20, 21, 22 hours. So yeah.
You could always fly out there.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. Get a rental, tear up the rental, trying to run those 2-track roads out there.
Just make sure you buy the extra insurance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was rough, but minus the rain, just not catching. You knew why you weren't, but at the same time, it was still just, it gets under your skin.
Right.
Because you're just spinning your wheels out there, but you still got to give it the effort.
Right. And when we go on these trips, we like to put together a show for Hoosier Trapper Outdoors. So,
we got one highlight reel.
Yeah, and that's it. So, that's kind of, here we are, I don't know, whatever we were going, 8 days gone, 8 days invested in that, or 7 days, whatever it was. And we come up with one show. That's not,
Yeah.
that's not very good. So, but you can't control the weather. And we've run into that before. I think this, I don't know which was worse. This trip, I think the worst was we were in North Arkansas and we got in that snowstorm and potential the ice warning came in.
Yeah.
And that we were only there maybe check traps, maybe 3 days and we were out of there.
Definitely the worst.
It was
based on weather and misery.
Yeah.
I was completely miserable.
Yeah,
we were exposed to the elements. We weren't in a truck. We were in like a little side by side.
It was
like a, I don't even know what it was.
like a mule,
Yeah.
so.
And no windshield or anything.
Right.
You just, that stuff's hitting your hands. It's like a wet snow. So you're soaked and it's just freezing.
Right. Yeah, that
was hard.
Yeah.
My hands hurt, but you got to hold on the steering wheel to drive. And you're better off taking those sopping wet gloves off and just grin and bear it.
Yeah. In terms of misery while we were pulling traps, that was definitely worse than what we just had, for sure.
I still remember looking at your face, and you couldn't even see through your glasses.
Oh, I was just covered in snow. Yeah, yeah. That was absolutely miserable. So, and we've all experienced that, and it's just disappointing when you invest the time and effort to go on a trip, and then it turns out like that. And people that hunt, they've done that. I know guys that come in here that hunt Canada or Alaska or even out west, and you get in a situation where there's fog for 10, 14 days and you can't get out, or like Jeff Haggerty was talking about trapping on Kodiak Island a year ago, and the weather just basically
shut them down. They
got maybe one night to check traps or whatever, that they felt safe enough to get in there and to get out by plane. So that can happen to anybody, and that's just the way it is. It's the nature of this stuff with the weather. So, but then we had the issue too of small ground and all that as well. But
what else you got, Charlie?
What else?
I think we appropriated. Did I tell you the name of this episode?
What's the name of it going to be?
It's called the Tennessee Blues. Because man, it was rough.
It was rough.
Oh, but one thing I would like to do, and I think we should do a trap and trip water related here or down in the South, Tennessee or further.
We do have an offer in Arkansas.
That'd be great
For a beaver.
Just something different.
Yeah, beaver trip.
That'd be fun putting that together.
I know in the most recent issue of Who's Your Trapper Outdoors, we did the muskrat kayak style, and then we got one more episode coming out.
That's getting a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, people have enjoyed that. Something different for us to do. Typically, we don't do that. So that was a good fun couple days, and we just hit a window on that one where that was January trapping, but we just hit a window of nice weather, sunny for the most part, and
yeah.
So no ice to deal with, and it was good. It was a good trip. So
good times.
It was here in Indiana, so it was close to home. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we ought to try to maybe do a water trip with beaver trapping. Some have said, well, the water animals aren't near as sexy as catching coyotes, bobcats, and foxes. But
there's a lot of action, though.
Yeah.
So.
It's all trapping, and if you're a trapper, then you're going to appreciate and like all of it. So. Some of it's harder work than others. I mean, I will clearly admit that, beaver trapping is a lot of work, and they're fun to catch, but they're a lot of work. The traps are big. The animal's big. The skin and put up is a lot of work, so, of course, coyotes are not the greatest to put up either. They're a bit difficult to skin, and if you got a winch and all that, then yeah, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. So, but yeah.
One more thing we should probably talk about before we head out of here is we're at the Boat Sport and Travel Show this weekend. If you're in the Indianapolis area, stop by and see us. We got a booth.
Yeah, it's
Fur Taker's got a booth there. If you need to sign up or renew or for become a member, we got all that paperwork there, and we're basically just kind of educating some of the public that's coming by the booth. How many people show up to this one?
Oh, it's a huge show. It's one of the top 5, hunting outdoor shows in the country. Yeah. This basically the last 3 days of the Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show, or the last 4 days, I should say, are devoted to they've got a separate section for it. It's called the Whitetail, Turkey, and Waterfowl Expo, and that's the part that we're with. So we're not there for the entire 10-day show. We're there for the last 4 days of it, and that's that's the specific hunting show. So if you're in Indiana, and there's people that travel from out of state as well, but if you're from Indiana, it is a tradition to go to. It's one of those, it's a huge.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. So if you show up to be honest, if those of you that got a little bit of a flexible schedule, Friday or Thursday are the days to go, because the crowds are, it's easier to maneuver the buildings. The crowds aren't crazy.
Or late Sunday. Things wind down a little quick, so if you can make your rounds fast.
Yeah,
Saturday is a madhouse.
Right.
I mean, it's shoulder to shoulder in there the whole time.
Right.
But
yeah, it's a dysfunctional crowd basically. It's so crowded. So,
but it's nice to be in there and think that we're doing something good as far as on behalf of trappers. Spreading some knowledge and talking about trapping to people, because there's a lot of obviously the deer hunters there and turkey hunters. They may not know, but they want to maybe control their property with. Catch a few coyotes or whatnot. Then you got people that just flat out don't know at all.
Right.
And we're there to kind of teach them through it or show them, a few things.
Or we get the guys that come up and said, I love to trap, but I don't do it anymore because the stuff's just not worth anything. Well, my answer to that is, well, you don't really love to trap then.
Liar.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, but they're saying, well, it's like, well, what's stuff worth? And you tell them, I said, well, the coyote market's pretty good, and right now the muskrat market's not really bad, but everything else is really cheap. And there's like, well, it's just not worth it. Well, it's like, well, how much did your deer hunting?
Yeah.
What kind of payback did you get on that, and what were you spending to deer hunt? And
yeah, exactly.
So this is what we enjoy doing, and this is what we like, and that the fur prices are secondary. I mean, nobody's going to deny that a fur check's nice. I mean, everybody likes their fur check, but we're going to trap regardless of what the fur check may be. So. So anyways, all of that whole scenario is talked about when you have a show like this that's open to hunters and specifically whitetail hunters, deer hunters, or turkey hunters, waterfowl hunters, that kind of thing. So it's a different perspective for sure. And that kind of goes back to the Tennessee trip, because we were invited down by a deer hunter who had done just a little bit of trapping.
Yeah.
So his perspective on what we needed, how you set up, how those coyotes traveled. I mean, he got a real learning experience from that, and he admitted it. He's like, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of a deer hunter, not from the standpoint of a trapper, because he didn't have the baseline for that. So kind of interesting.
Yeah. He was definitely starting to catch on riding with us a few days.
Right. It was definitely an eye opener for him, for sure. So another thing I want to mention is selling fur. Get lots of questions. Where am I going to sell my fur? What do I do with it? NAFA has closed its doors, so NAFA's not available. Obviously, they sold a lot of consigned a lot of wild fur. So obviously, Fur Harvesters is still out there. They're running routes. Check their website for their route schedule, sales schedule, last receiving dates, all that kind of stuff. And then most states have trapper sales that you can take your fur to the trapper sales and sell it that way. So far, most of them that I have heard have done pretty well, and there have been a number of buyers at those sales. There's a few that have not performed very well, and it's so important who the buyers are that show up to the sale. And then Groenwald fur. I mean, you can't mention the fur industry without mentioning Groenwald out of Illinois. Absolutely huge buyers. In fact, they're going to come to our place on March 8th from Sunday afternoon from 12 to 2 and buy out here in the parking lot. They're running routes as well in other states, so you can check their website. I think it's gfwco.com.
I think that's right.
Yeah, if you type that in on the computer or just type in Groenwald Fur Company, Fur and Wool, it will come up, and check their schedule for what routes they're running, where you can meet them. You can even drive the fur up to their place. And they're writing checks. It's not a consignment like a auction thing. Yeah. So
you get a check on the spot.
Right. So We're not connected with them in any way other than we just want to provide our past NAFA people another option to sell their fur. So since NAFA fell out, we used to be NAFA receiving agents. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that because we're getting that time of year where people are looking for places and outlets to sell their fur. So and this doesn't just pertain to Indiana. This pertains to wherever you're at. So for sure.
Yeah, definitely check your local chapters, FTA chapters, or the NTA of your state, and they'll have something.
Right, and if they don't,
they'll tell you where.
Right.
I mean, I think part of the bylaws for the fur taker local chapters is they have to host a fur sale. Is that correct?
Yeah, for our local chapter.
Yeah. Ours is March 7th down in Columbus, Indiana, at the fairgrounds. So looking forward to that. Yeah,
doors open at 8, and that is typically, it's not one of the most giant sales in the country. I think it'll be pretty big this year because of NAFA being out of the picture. But that sale typically does pretty well. I mean, it has good buyer support. I can remember some in the past years ago that weren't too exciting. But in general, that's a pretty good sale. And like I said, the buyer support is key. It all depends on who shows up to buy. But anyways, and it's funny. I just thinking about this, thinking out loud. Last fall, when NAFA basically shut their doors and said they were not going to be accepting fur this year, I thought there would be more, but I only had 2 or 3 people call up and said, "Well, should I even trap?
There was very little of that. It was more or less like, I still got fur up there. I need some money.
Yeah. So, anyways, still get out and trap. You'll be if you want to sell your fur. I mean, you may have to put a little effort into it this time, but
it's out there.
It's out
for
there.
Sure.
There's plenty of outlets. So.
All right. Well, we'll see you with another one probably here in a couple of weeks. Don't even know what the topic's going to be yet, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
As always, just hit us online, social media, follow us. I will say, once we hit 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube page, where we run the Trap House podcast, the First Shed series, the Hoosier Trapper Outdoors, all that. Once we hit 10,000, there's a cool little link on there to where you can design t-shirts to sell. Well, that's when I think I'm going to release Trap House Podcast t-shirts that will be available. And they're reasonable. And when I don't have to invest in a bunch of money and get a stockpile of shirts, they're click made to order on the spot sort of deal. So it's kind of neat. So please subscribe and share us. Let's get this thing built up as big as we can. So.
Right. One thing while you mentioned that, Justin, within the Hoosier Trapper Outdoors YouTube page, we have the new how-to section. So we're uploading shorter instructional segments for quick reference. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, for instance, see how to make a dirt hole set, see how to make wax dirt, see how to skin a coyote, and then we will actually, and there's others on there, we will actually continue to add to that.
That's more like a year-round thing, right?
Right. Like
when something comes up, some of the stuff will be used in shows, and some of it might not be.
Right.
Just whatever kind of happens at the time.
So, it'll be like a lot of people say, hey, how do I do such and such? And they say, well, we did have that on one of the shows, but you're going to have to go back to whatever episode if we can even reference all that.
Yeah.
So we're pulling stuff that is commonly asked to use in this how-to section. So, so for quick reference.
It's hard to go back. We've uploaded over 100 videos. We have over 1 million views. It's hard to figure out where certain things were what season. So this will be a lot better.
Right.
For that little how-to section will be really good for people that trying to pick up a quick tip or forgot and need a quick reference. So
right. Unfortunately, don't look for a lot of shows from our past Tennessee trip.
Yeah. I won't forget this one. All right. Thanks. And we'll see you next time.